To say that I'm obsessed with personal finance is an understatement, but I've struggled to find someone I can relate to who can provide sound money advice, partly because in generations past, my culture has frowned upon these types of discussions. The Check Your Money podcast was created in my quest to find a space of support and network of people just like me that want to grow financially. I'm excited to share ways you can improve your current and future financial health, set and meet money goals, and even plan for retirement in this ever-changing economy. I hope that by the end of this episode, you'll say to yourself at least once, I need to check my money today. So I recently posted a picture on Instagram that I've always loved. It's a 4-generation picture. It's a Polaroid. It's got myself, my daughter, my mom, and my grandmother. My mom doesn't look too happy because I had announced this day that I was moving from New Jersey to Connecticut. Any of my fellow Latinxers listening know exactly why she was salty. For everyone else, Latinos don't typically do this. And if they do, there will be a fallout. Anyway, so I captioned it, one of these women couldn't open a credit card without her husband's signature. So back in the day, women had Squirrel accounts. And I don't mean the budget app, all right? Squirrel's an app that's great. It splits your salary into bills, goals, and like weekly allowance, like fun money, right? I'm not talking about that. Women literally had to hide their money, okay? And what I found out this week was shocking to me. So I was reading a book and it was like a little piece of information. I don't even know how it fit into the book, to be honest with you. I was looking at like how to retire 5 years from now or something like that. And I could not believe what I read. So let's start with the little known fact, at least to me, that up until 1964, maternity leave was practically considered permanent, right? Now, what do I mean by this? So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed in that year. But before that, employers were under no legal obligation to keep an employee who got pregnant. Now, as many as 40%, from what I read, of businesses use this loophole to their perceived benefit. And I say perceived because, come on, we're great workers. Full protection and access to benefits wasn't provided to childbearing women until the 1978 Pregnancy Discrimination Act. And we're not talking 100 years ago. Like, this is our lifetime. So even more juicy, did you know that back in the day, a woman could not apply for a loan or a credit card without a male cosigner? And when a woman did apply, her income was discounted by as much as half as compared to a man's as part of the underwriting process. So think about it. As a married woman, you could not get a loan without your husband's signature. This is mind-boggling, okay? I remember, this reminds me of, again, one of these money stories that, I talked about in episode 1. I've got so many. I mean, there's just so many things that have happened that have really shaped my mind into what I want and what I don't want. But I remember going to lunch with a coworker, getting ready to go, and she says, "Oh, let me call my husband and see how much I could spend." And I thought to myself, I'll be damned if I ever ask a man how much I could spend of my hard-earned money. It's just not going to happen. Well, that wasn't necessarily the case, like for, our great grandmothers or our grandmothers, depending on how old you are. So in 1974, there's the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, and this is, it's passed, and it made it illegal for lenders to discriminate applicants against, on the basis of sex, marital status, race, color, age, religion, or national origin. So before this, companies were forced, companies were forced to finally just be able to allow women to obtain credit cards without, let's face it, a man's permission, because that's what it was. So basically, before 1974, it was perfectly legal and common practice for women, minorities, and low-income families to be excluded from obtaining credit because they were deemed a risk. And like I said before, this is 1974, like yesterday, right? Literally yesterday. So now it's 1974, right? So now, okay, I can apply for a credit card if I wanted to at the time, or I can get a loan if I wanted to without my man at the time. That's great. All right. So now what happens? Well, now the banks excluding being able unable to exclude these groups from obtaining credit, now they want to confuse us and get us into debt and keep us there. Okay? It becomes common practice. So they start sending out these amazing offers. And I'm sure if you've had, credit for a little while, you've seen these envelopes come across and it's like the zero interest for the first 90 days. Wow, how amazing, right? Well, in the back of the pamphlet or on the bottom in like the 3-point font, right? They hide that your rate is going to skyrocket to like 20% after that. Literally like 20%. Okay. So these are called teaser rates. Lower income people, women, and minorities were targeted because the groups were considered high risk and were priced accordingly. All right. So finally, we get, like I said before, we get granted the right to obtain credit only to become the victims of unfair business bank practices. Terms and rates were hidden, and without financial literacy, we don't realize the effect of just making a minimum payment. Let me explain. If you only pay the minimum payment and have a high balance and a high interest rate, chances are you're probably even just barely covering the interest. This means what you charged will take a lifetime to pay off. And we didn't really know this until come 2009. Thank you, Obama. The Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act is known as the CARD Act. Obama signed it into law. So now this really was an attempt to level the playing field, finally, right? It actually limited the teaser rate practice a little bit by making it a 1-year minimum before it could hike up. It provided protections against no-cause interest rate increases. Now, some of us are old enough to remember the free t-shirt we got on our college campus for applying for that credit card that got you into all that debt. They can't do that anymore. Again, thank you, the CARD Act. It also mandated consistent due dates and that they make your statement available no later than 3 weeks before the due date. So it's not like you're going to get a bill and it's due in a week. They can't do that anymore. So now let's just say your balance is part of a lower interest promo and you pay more than your minimum payment. Now they have to put that excess towards your high interest balance. So if you pay, your minimum payment's 100, you pay 120, 100 goes towards the promo, which is the low interest rate, which is where they're not making money. They have to take that $20 and put it towards your higher interest balance so that you could lower, what you owe them. So it kind of reduces their profit. Because again, interest is bank profit. That's how they make money. Okay. And last but not least, and this is really honestly the best part, in my opinion, they have to put a minimum payment warning. Okay, guys, this is so important. So this is a little chart on page 1. It tells you the time and the total interest it would take to pay off your current credit card balance if you only make the minimum monthly payments. The bill must also show you the minimum payment that you're required to pay, or the payment that you're required to pay in order to pay your card balance in 36 months, 3 years. And it has to provide a toll-free number for credit counseling and debt management. So if you want more information on the CARD Act, there was just so much more, but I chose the highlights. You can go on consumer-action.org and they have a fact sheet that just lists literally, everything, right? All right, so we're here. We can work without getting fired for being pregnant. We can get credit in our name and not have to ask for man for help. So now what? Well, now we're stressed because we think the other shoe is going to drop. So we hoard our money. We're not investing as much as men, or let's face it, us Latinos and other minorities are not investing as much as non-minorities. We, as women, are statistically not paying our credit card balances in full. So there's a wage gap by gender and by race. So Latinas are in a lose-lose. Some of us are leading single-parent households, trying to keep our heads above water. We are financially insecure. So, why did I choose this as my first topic? Because it's messed up. Because as women and minorities, we have been behind the curve, and this reduces our options. I'm all about options, okay? So, some may not agree, but I'm all for higher education at all costs, honestly. Why? Because it gives you options. And we need that as Latinos and as women. When I was married, I had my own savings account. Options. Okay. When I finally decided to pursue my master's, part of why I chose the path that I did, which, as I said on my first episode, it was family and consumer science with a family financial planning specialization, was so I could level up in my personal life and share what I learned with my friends and family. I still don't have any desire to leave my day job because I love what I do for a living. But I needed to catch up on all of the financial literacy that I lacked as a result of being raised in a traditional Latinx household where you're taught not to discuss money. So, as women and minorities, what can we do? What is my call to action, right? We can create money networks so that we can educate ourselves in all things money. The information is literally at our fingertips right now. You can access it without having to buy a thing once you own your phone, of course, or even leave your house. You don't like to read, or you have a long commute and don't have time to read? There's a dozens of personal finance podcasts available. Wink hint. You don't feel like you can relate to who you're listening to? Try another one. I've listened to many over the last couple years since I started the program. And while I've gotten some great information, the only Latina that I knew of and learned from up until recently was Jen Hemphill from Her Dinero Matters. It used to be Her Money Matters. I actually just was going through my Instagram feed and I found a screenshot I had posted in February of 2018 of me, just listening to her podcast. So over the last month or so, though, I have discovered Yo Quiero Dinero, which is when I realized there was a community of women just like me, women who grew up like me, who have similar money stories as me. And so now I have flooded my Instagram feed following these women because they make me feel at home financially. This is my money network. They motivate me to keep checking my money. What else can we do? We can get a handle on our debt. Okay. And there's a basic money principle for some, but for others, it's like, how do I do that? Right. So you can start this by starting a budget that works for you. Now, why did I say it like that? Because there's some standard budgets out there. There's like that 50, 30, 20. There's the, you're only supposed to be spending 50% of your income on housing. There's a bunch of different budgets out there, but you know what? They're all guidelines. And not everybody can budget their money according to these guidelines. I mean, if your rent is more than 50% of your income, then your rent is more than 50% of your income. I mean, it is what it is. And starting a budget really just means tracking your money. Okay. That's it. Tracking where your money is going. So it's kind of how, like, you don't realize that you consume so many calories until you start tracking what you eat. And then you're like, whoa, no wonder. Only then can you really see what shape you're in. And I mean that for money too. Because let's face it, you may not even be that bad, but since you've been avoiding it, you really don't know. So once you start tracking, you'll really be able to see where your money's going, if you're spending too much in a certain area, and then you can kind of, track it accordingly. And you might even have your aha moment of, wow, I really spend too much eating out, or I really spend too much on these morning coffees. And then you can start just allocating your money accordingly, or just kind of like, okay, you know what, let me make better decisions, or maybe really think about what you're doing and change it. So if part of your struggle is credit card debt, you could stop the bleeding by contacting the credit card company and seeing if they'll reduce your interest rate. Any reduction will help. And it just really takes calling, asking. If you don't get what you want from the first person, ask for a supervisor. They may be able to help you, not necessarily, but they might be able to help you. So it's worth a shot, but you really just want to lower what they're charging you as much as you possibly can so that you could try to get a handle on it. If you happen to have a card with an annual fee, call them and see if they'll waive it. Again, the worst they could say is no. They're not going to close your account or anything like that. So just call and ask. And if possible, see if you have a balance transfer offer available so that you can work your debt out faster. Now, what's a balance transfer offer? So for those who don't know, sometimes you have offers available on a credit card. Well, they'll give you a zero or a really low interest rate if you move your balance from another card over to them. And what happens is, obviously, as you're sending in more money, that money is getting towards your principal, getting applied towards your principal, and you'll be getting out of debt a lot faster as opposed to paying, $100 a month, and 80 of that is towards interest. And, you're really not making any headway. So, again, if you've got one of these transfers available, check around on your credit card portals, like log into everything and see what you may have. I'll tell you, I always have an offer available on every single card. And I'm assuming right now, due to COVID, the banks are like, whoa, no, you know what? We're not going to take any risk right now. I'm assuming I'm my whole life I've had offers available. And I've checked like 4 different cards and nothing. So you may not have it a bit available to you right now, but maybe once we're out of this whole, COVID situation, it'll be there. And that's just a start. There's a whole money world out there. I encourage all of you to step into it, please. It includes investing, it includes insurance, estate planning, tax planning, and financial counseling if you need it. And most of all, there's a support system in the way of a money community that includes women of color who are more than happy to help and answer any and all questions. Obviously, this community includes everybody, but what I'm trying to say is that we have a voice. Latinas have a voice right now, and we've got people who are eager to learn. And what I really, really want is for you to connect with someone, anyone, if it's me or if it's, another podcaster or another, a blogger or somebody on Instagram, anybody who you can connect to where the way they're explaining things click for you. Because that's the only way you're going to learn is if you connect with somebody and it clicks in your head and you're like, wait, hold on. I never understood that before. But the way you explained it to me helped me understand it. And now I can do better because I know better. Okay, like Maya Angelou said. So why is this all necessary? To be financially independent. And I stress every word of that. Okay. If you're financially independent, you have options. And again, options is my favorite word. It's my favorite goal. And financial independence allows you that. It allows you that if you're in a marriage you don't really want to stay in. It allows you that if you really want to leave, living with your parents. It allows you that if you don't like your job, anything. Financial independence is the key to all of that. Okay. And financial independence doesn't just help you, it helps your daughters, it helps your sisters, it even helps your moms. It helps everybody in your circle. Okay. That when they see that you're doing better, they may actually say, wait, hold on, what's going on? Okay. And then you'll be able to share your knowledge and it just gets passed on and we break this cycle. Okay. So you've got this, you can do this. As I said, there's so much support out there right now. I encourage you to seek it out. And oh man, I don't know if you can hear the fire in me right now, but I want to inspire and motivate you to check your money. Why? Because you can. So check your knowledge. Some of you may be receiving the extra $600 of unemployment that is being provided by the CARES Act. So basically, any eligible unemployed person will receive both regular unemployment benefits from their state and an additional $600 per week from the federal government. As of right now, that is from April 5th of 2020 through July 31st of 2020. I say as of now because things, can change. And again, this is federal, the $600, not state. So you either didn't have the option to withhold taxes from it or you chose not to. This is a mistake, guys. You're going to get taxed on the $600 when you go file your taxes next year. Okay. So if you're on this, this unemployment for a while and getting this money for a while, you can get hit. So if you're already receiving benefits, you can fill out an IRS form W-4V, voluntary withholding request, to adjust your withholding. You can also make changes on a biweekly basis when you're asked to certify your unemployment claim. So just kind of check on that, and that might vary state to state. So you just want to look into that. Check with your state's unemployment insurance program to make sure you follow the appropriate steps. And the U.S. Department of Labor's Career One Stop website has links to every state program. Okay, so that's your check your knowledge for the week. I want to thank you so much for listening. My goal is that at some point during this episode, you said to yourself at least once, I need to check my money today. You can find me on Instagram at checkyourmoney_podcast and on Facebook at checkyourmoney. I encourage you to please, if you're enjoying this podcast, to subscribe and leave feedback. I would appreciate it. It'll help me for future episodes. I've got great things lined up, and I'm really excited that you're on this journey with me. Thanks again for listening to the Check Your Money podcast. I would love to hear from you. You can email me feedback at norma@checkyourmoney.today. And remember to subscribe, follow, and rate at Apple or Google Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Also, if you can, please leave a review if you're enjoying this podcast. It's the easiest way to help it grow and be able to help continue to motivate and inspire others. The information provided in the Check Your Money podcast, associated social media accounts, and website is intended solely for the personal, non-commercial use of the user who accepts full responsibility of its use. While we have taken every precaution to ensure that the content of the aforementioned is both current and accurate, errors can occur. We accept no responsibility or liability for any errors or omissions in the content. The information provided by Check Your Money and its affiliated entities is general in nature, provided for educational purposes only, and should not be considered to be legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. In all cases, you should consult with professional advisors familiar with your personal factual situation for advice concerning specific matters before making any decisions.